My cheating fiancée's friends physically attacked me after I refused to marry her, so I took legal action. Hey Reddit. This is the final update, and if you haven't seen the previous parts, check the I button for the full story. Let's dive into this final update. The days after Jenna's apology were a strange mix of relief and confusion. On one hand, I appreciated her honesty and the fact that she recognized the magnitude of what had happened. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it was all too little, too late. I wanted closure, but the more I thought about everything, the more I realized that closure wasn't something I was going to get easily. The damage had been done, and the betrayal still stung, no matter how much time passed. But I had no choice but to keep moving forward. The case was far from over, and the longer it dragged on, the more I felt like my life was being held hostage by the past. I couldn't let it control me anymore. At this point, the legal battle was consuming most of my energy. I had meetings with my lawyer almost every day, going over the details of the case, figuring out how to approach the next steps. Lisa had hired a lawyer of her own, and I knew the battle was going to be long and exhausting. But I was ready. I had to be. This wasn't just about the physical attack anymore, it was about standing up for myself, about holding those who had wronged me accountable. And as much as I wanted it to be over, I knew that the fight wasn't going to end quickly. There would be twists and turns, delays, and emotional tolls that would test me at every step. The police had gathered enough evidence to make a strong case against Lisa's friends, but the legal system is never as straightforward as it seems. There were still witnesses to interview, statements to be taken, and motions to be filed. I had to prepare myself for the possibility that this could drag on for months, maybe even longer. Every time I thought I could take a break, something else would pop up, demanding my attention. It felt like I was constantly on edge, unable to relax for fear of what would happen next. During this time, I decided to take some time off work to focus on the case and my mental health. The physical recovery had been slow but steady. My ribs still hurt if I moved too quickly, and my lip had taken longer than expected to heal, leaving a scar I wasn't sure would ever fully fade. But it was the emotional toll that I was really struggling with. I had always prided myself on being strong, on being able to handle whatever life threw at me. But this was different. The weight of everything that had happened was unbearable at times. The lies, the betrayal, the assault, everything kept replaying in my mind like a broken record. It felt like I was trapped in an endless cycle of anger, confusion, and pain. I spent hours on the phone with my lawyer, going over the details of Lisa's involvement in the attack. The more I learned, the angrier I became. It was clear that she had orchestrated the entire thing, manipulating her friends into thinking they were somehow justified in hurting me. They had believed her lies, let their loyalty to her cloud their judgment, and they had all paid the price for it. I didn't know if I could ever forgive any of them. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deeply they had all failed me. These weren't just people I had known for years, they were people who had been part of my inner circle, people I had trusted. And now, they were responsible for tearing everything apart. My family was still divided on the issue. My dad was supportive, but even he seemed to have doubts about how far I was willing to take this. My mom, on the other hand, was still convinced that there was some way to salvage the situation. She kept telling me that I should try to work things out with Lisa, that relationships could be repaired if both parties were willing to put in the effort. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't go back to her, couldn't pretend like everything was fine after what she had done. I had given her everything, and she had thrown it all away for a fling with another man. That was the truth I had to accept. I couldn't keep living in denial, and yet, despite all of this, a small part of me still missed her. The person I thought Lisa was had been everything I wanted, supportive, loving, fun. But that person didn't exist anymore, and I had to face the harsh reality of that. I had to remind myself that I wasn't the one who had destroyed everything. I wasn't the one who had lied, who had betrayed trust, who had physically attacked someone. I had done nothing wrong except love someone who didn't deserve it. As the days dragged on, I started to feel more isolated. My circle of friends had grown smaller. Some had stuck by me, offering their support, but others had turned their backs. I couldn't blame them for it, they had their own relationships with Lisa, and I knew it wasn't easy to choose sides. But the ones who remained, the ones who really cared about me, were the only ones I had left. They checked in on me regularly, tried to lift my spirits when the weight of everything threatened to pull me under. And while it was comforting, it wasn't enough to shake the feeling that I was alone in this fight. As the court date loomed closer, I tried to prepare myself for the worst. I knew that Lisa would try to turn everything around on me, to paint herself as the victim, to twist the story in her favor. I had seen how she could manipulate people, how easily she could make them believe whatever she wanted them to believe. It terrified me. What if the jury didn't see the truth? What if all of this was for nothing? I had to be ready for that, for the possibility that everything could fall apart. But no matter how many doubts crept into my mind, I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't let them get away with it. It was time to face the music. The truth was out there, and it would come to light in the courtroom. I just had to trust that justice would prevail. But in the meantime, I prepared myself for what was to come. Every moment felt like a countdown, like I was gearing up for a final showdown that would determine the rest of my life. The days leading up to the court hearing were some of the hardest of my life. I had no idea what to expect, and every night, my thoughts ran wild, imagining all the possible outcomes. Would Lisa's lies be enough to sway the jury? Would they see me as the victim or as the angry ex trying to get revenge? The fear gnawed at me, but I couldn't let it paralyze me. I had come too far to turn back now. I had to see this through, no matter how painful or difficult it became. When the court date finally arrived, I was a bundle of nerves. I had spent weeks preparing, making sure my testimony was solid, trying to recall every detail of the events leading up to that fateful night, and reviewing all the evidence that supported my case. The police report, the security footage, the medical records of my injuries, it all pointed to one undeniable fact: Lisa's friends had attacked me. The evidence was irrefutable, but I knew that didn't guarantee anything in court. Anything could happen. As I sat in the courtroom, waiting for the proceedings to begin, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The room was full of people, lawyers, witnesses, and strangers who were there to observe. Lisa's lawyer was sitting across from me, a cold, professional woman who had been working tirelessly to defend her. She shot me a look, and I could feel the animosity radiating from her. I had no doubt that she would do everything in her power to make sure I came out of this looking like the bad guy. When it was time for the trial to begin, my lawyer stood and started to outline our case. He painted a clear picture of what had happened that night, laying out all the facts and evidence in a way that left no room for doubt. The police reports were read aloud, the footage from the security cameras was shown on a screen, and the witnesses who had seen the attack testified one by one. The evidence was overwhelming. It was clear that Lisa's friends had physically assaulted me, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. But as the testimonies unfolded, I started to feel the weight of it all. Every word, every look, every motion felt like an attack on my very character. Lisa's defense team was doing their best to discredit me, to make me seem like the villain in this story. They tried to suggest that I had provoked the attack, that I was exaggerating my injuries, that I had a history of being aggressive. They threw everything they could at me, but I refused to back down. The worst part was when Lisa took the stand. She looked different than I remembered, colder, more distant, like she had hardened herself to the reality of what she had done. She didn't seem remorseful at all, just defiant. She told the court her version of the story, spinning a web of lies that painted me as the one at fault. She claimed that I had been emotionally abusive during our relationship, that I had been the one who had manipulated and controlled her. She even went so far as to say that I had been violent in the past, trying to make me seem like someone who was capable of the very things I was accusing her of. It was a slap in the face, but I held my ground. I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to let her twist it. Her words stung, but I couldn't let them break me. The court was tense as Lisa's lawyer wrapped up their argument. They had tried to make me out to be the aggressor, the one who had brought all of this upon myself, but my lawyer was quick to counter. He pointed out the holes in their story, the inconsistencies in Lisa's testimony, and the fact that all the evidence was in my favor. He reminded the jury of the assault, the injuries, and the fact that no matter what Lisa said, there was no excuse for what had happened. The longer the trial went on, the more I realized how much my life had been affected by these events. What started as a painful breakup had turned into a public spectacle, a courtroom battle for my dignity and my future. It was exhausting, and as much as I wanted it to end, I knew that this was something I had to see through to the end. When it was time for the jury to deliberate, the tension in the air was palpable. I sat there, waiting for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing with 1,000 different thoughts. What if they didn't believe me? What if Lisa and her friends walked away scot-free? What if everything I had been through, the pain, the betrayal, the attack, was for nothing? The thought was unbearable, but I pushed it to the back of my mind. All I could do now was wait. Finally, after hours of waiting, the jury returned with their verdict. My heart pounded in my chest as the judge called the room to order. I could hardly breathe as the foreman stood up and began to speak. The words felt like they were moving in slow motion as they were read aloud. Guilty. Lisa's friends were found guilty of assault, and the case was ruled in my favor. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, followed by an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. It was over. After months of emotional turmoil, it was finally over. But as the reality set in, I couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. Yes, I had won. Yes, the justice system had worked in my favor. But the damage had already been done. I had lost someone I had loved, and I had lost a part of myself in the process. The scars from the physical attack would eventually fade, but the emotional wounds would take much longer to heal. I wasn't sure if I would ever fully recover from what had happened, but I knew one thing for sure: I had survived. And no matter what, I wasn't going to let the actions of others define my future. As I walked out of the courtroom that day, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sorrow. The fight had been long and painful, but it had taught me something valuable. No matter how dark things get, you always have the power to stand up for yourself. And that's exactly what I did. With the case behind me, I took some time to focus on rebuilding my life. I started therapy to work through the emotional scars, reconnected with the friends who had stood by me, and slowly began to trust people again. It wasn't easy, and there were days when it felt like I would never be the same. But with each passing day, I felt a little stronger, a little more like the person I used to be before everything fell apart. And as for Lisa and her friends? They went their separate ways. The court ruling didn't change the past, but it gave me a sense of closure. It gave me the chance to move on and rebuild, free from the toxic grip they had on my life. I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their friendship anymore. I had learned to rely on myself, and that was enough. I may have lost a part of myself in this journey, but I had gained something much more valuable: the strength to move forward, to heal, and to never let anyone, no matter how much they once meant to me, dictate my happiness again. And with that, my life began again.